By now, you've probably seen the clip. Someone on holiday in northern Denmark pulls out their phone, points it at a building sitting alone on a hill, and the comments section immediately collapses into chaos. And the reaction makes complete sense, because the resemblance is genuinely startling. But here is what almost everyone missed. The viral moment wasn't the whole story. It wasn't even close to the whole story, because once you actually slow down and look at this building properly, the real building, every wall, every window, every angle, there is an entire layer of connections that nobody has fully laid out. Today, we are doing exactly that. Every hidden detail of Peppa Pig's real house. Let's go. The building is called Vennebjerg Kirke, Vennebjerg Church, and it sits just outside Lundstrup in the Uring municipality of northern Denmark. It is the highest situated church in the entire region of Vendsyssel. And the first thing you need to understand about it is not just that it is on a hill, but how it is on a hill. The church doesn't sit at the edge of an incline or near the top of a gentle slope. It sits dead center on the highest point available, completely alone, with open land dropping away from it in every direction. There is nothing else up there. No fence, no cluster of nearby buildings, no road running alongside it. Just the church, the sky, and the hill. Now look at Peppa's house. That is the exact same relationship to its surroundings. The house doesn't sit in a neighborhood. It doesn't share a street. It owns its hill, the way Vennebjerg Kirke owns its hill. Now let's go further than the overview, because the specific details are where it gets genuinely strange. Start with the roof. Peppa's house has a red triangular roof with a perfectly symmetrical pitch, wide at the base, pointed at the top, nothing complicated about it. Vennebjerg Kirke has a red triangular roof with a perfectly symmetrical pitch. Then, the walls. Peppa's house has plain, flat, pale-colored walls with no decorative detailing, nothing that distracts from the simple shape. The church walls are exactly the same. Ancient whitewashed stone that from any distance reads as a flat, pale surface with no ornamentation. Then the proportions. The width of the building relative to its height, the way the roof takes up roughly the same visual space as the walls below it. If you put a screenshot of Peppa's house next to a photograph of the Danish church taken from the right angle, the outlines are almost identical. This is not a building that is sort of similar to a cartoon house. It is a building that a child's drawing accidentally described 850 years before anyone thought to draw it. And then there is the tower. This is the detail that almost everyone skipped over in the viral moment because they were too busy reacting to the overall shape. Peppa's house has a single chimney sitting towards the left side of the roof when viewed from the front. Small, simple, perfectly upright. Vennebjerg Kirke has a small square tower structure that sits in almost exactly the same position relative to its roofline. It is not a chimney, it is a church tower, hundreds of years old. But from a distance, in a photograph taken from the road, it reads as a rectangular block sitting at the edge of the roof, and it maps almost perfectly onto the chimney in the cartoon. Nobody planned that. Nobody decided the medieval tower of a Danish church would one day look like the chimney on a children's television program. It just does, because both were built to be simple, upright, and visible. The match isn't just the house. It goes all the way to the chimney, and nobody notices. Now here is where the location itself becomes something much more than a coincidence. The hill that Vennebjerg Kirke sits on is not just a hill. Directly alongside the church is a burial mound called Klangshøj, one of the oldest sacred sites in Denmark. In 2013, the National Museum of Denmark and the Department of Geography at the University of Copenhagen investigated the mound scientifically. Using carbon-14 dating of well-preserved plant remains found within its construction, they confirmed that Klangshøj was built during the Viking Age, approximately 700 to 1050 CE. The mound is flat-topped, the same distinctive shape as the royal burial mounds at Jelling, the mounds built for Viking kings. Research published in the Danish Journal of Archaeology confirmed that the internal hydrology of Klangshøj is identical to that of the Jelling mounds. Legends tell of a well that once existed on its flat top, just as one existed at Jelling. This was not a small or ordinary burial site. Whatever is inside Klangshøj, it was built by people doing the same thing Viking kings were doing at Jelling, and Peppa's house sits right next to it. The Vikings chose that spot for the same reason the church builders chose it 800 years later, and the same reason a cartoon house ended up there 1,000 years after that. It was the highest point for miles in every direction. Commanding, visible from the sea, impossible to ignore. The kind of place you choose when you want something to last. The hill itself was formed approximately 20,000 years ago during the late Weichselian Ice Age, which explains not just why Klangshui is there, but why every building in the surrounding area ends up on its own elevated plot. The glaciers shaped the land into a landscape of natural hills, and the Vikings, the medieval church builders, and the coastal communities that followed them all built on the highest point available, because that is simply what the geography demanded. Vennebjerg sits on a hill formed 20,000 years ago. The Vikings built a sacred mound on it. The church went up alongside, and one day, someone drove past on a road in northern Denmark and thought it looked exactly like a cartoon pig's house. Now look at the village around it. This is the part of the story that genuinely reframes the whole thing. Lundstrup does not look like a normal town. It does not have flat streets with rows of houses pressed against each other. It has those glacial hills, one per building, each one elevated, each one separated from its neighbors by open land. And the result is a real place where every house sits on its own peak, visible from a distance as an isolated shape against the sky. You cannot build flat in Lundstrup. The geography simply does not allow it. And so the landscape looks like someone used Peppa Town as a reference when deciding where to put the buildings. Except it has looked this way for 20,000 years. The Ice Age built Peppa Town. It just took until recently for anyone to notice. And then, along the same coastal trail that links the church to the sea, there is Rubjerg Knud Lighthouse. It sits on the edge of the Lundstrup Klint Cliff, 60 meters above the North Sea. Tall, isolated, perched dramatically above the water. Built to be seen from boats, positioned at the highest available point on the coastline with nothing between it and the horizon. Coastal erosion got so severe that in 2019, Uring Municipality paid to move the entire structure inland on rails to preserve it. Now look at Grandpa Rabbit's lighthouse in Peppa Pig, the silhouette, the cliff, the way the building commands the sea below it, the same perched, isolated energy. The same area that contains the church that looks like Peppa's house also contains the lighthouse that looks like Grandpa Rabbit's. At some point, this stops being a coincidence and starts being a location scout. The explanation, or at least part of it, runs through the people who made the show. Peppa Pig was created by Neville Astley and Mark Baker, alongside producer Phil Davies, at their studio Astley Baker Davies in London. And here's the thing about Mark Baker that most of the viral moment coverage completely missed. The hill was never a creative choice he made for Peppa Pig specifically. It was the only way he had ever drawn. In 1988, while studying at the National Film and Television School, Baker made his debut animated short film. It was called The Hill Farm, a farmhouse on a hill. That film won the Grand Prix at the Annecy International Animation Festival, a BAFTA, and an Oscar nomination. The same flat, simple shapes, the same childlike visual logic, the same hilly terrain that would later define an entire animated universe. It was completed 16 years before Peppa's first episode aired. The hill was already there before Peppa existed. It was baked into Mark Baker's visual language from the very beginning of his career. Then, in 1999, Astley and Baker made The Big Nights. 2 nights, a castle on elevated ground, a medieval world where the important structures sit high and visible. Same aesthetic, same instinct. Then, Peppa Pig arrived in 2004, and suddenly it was not one building on a hill. It was an entire town where every house follows that rule. Then Ben and Holly's Little Kingdom in 2009, a fairy kingdom of elevated structures, the castle, the elf tree, the windmill, all sitting above the meadow floor. 3 shows, 3 completely different worlds, the same 2 people, and in every single one, the things that matter are up high. Mark Baker told the Financial Times that every frame of Peppa Pig is designed from a child's perspective, which is why Peppa's house sits alone at the top of a hill. Because when a child draws their house, even if it is on a terrace, they will draw it by itself. That is the design logic. And what makes Vennebjerg so remarkable is that it was built using exactly the same logic in 1150. Build it on the highest point. Make it impossible to miss. So, there it is. A church built in approximately 1150 CE, sitting next to a Viking Age burial mound called Klangshoy, scientifically confirmed to share its construction with the royal mounds at Jelling, on a glacial hill formed 20,000 years ago, surrounded by a village where every building sits on its own elevated plot, with a lighthouse down the coast that matches Grandpa Rabbit's, made recognizable by a creator who had been drawing farmhouses and castles on hills since 1988, because that is his visual language, and it always has been. The Vikings chose that hill because it was the commanding point. The church builders chose it for the same reason. Mark Baker drew a house on a hill because that is how children show where the important place is. 3 traditions, across 1,000 years, arriving at the same answer. Vennebjerg Kirke has been sitting on that hill since 1150. It just took a phone, a road trip, and the entire internet having a moment to connect the dots. Which detail surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments. Thank you for watching.